Katie, excited to have this conversation with you. Let's start by hearing a little bit about you and your career. You joined Burger King in 2018.
Yeah, that's right. So nearly I think it's about 7 years ago. Joined Burger King, and I think we were a pretty small team at the time, still are a pretty small team, arguably, for the size of brand, but had this amazing opportunity to basically take the keys, which I've said before, if any of you heard me talking about it, but take the keys to this really iconic brand with over 98% brand awareness, and start to bring it into cultural relevance again. The brand has obviously been around a very long time in the UK, but we had this opportunity to almost revive the brand again. And a lot of the work that we needed to do was on brand and creative bravery, and I guess with a kind of a global backdrop of creative bravery, we've had a lot of permission to do that over the last few years. So it's been a really lovely opportunity and a really lovely place and fun place to work.
Tell me about some of the highlights that you've had before this work, obviously.
It'll always come back to the campaigns where we have been probably a little bit more reactive and a bit more agile to try and tap into something that's really culturally relevant. And I guess it's the unexpected nature of that gets us excited. So I think some of the campaigns that were my highlights, and probably some of the team's highlights, were things like Meltdown, where we removed plastic toys from kids' meals overnight. It was a huge campaign from a PR perspective for us, but also something that felt quite brave and impactful at the time. And I guess another campaign that I look back on really fondly was the campaign where we pulled a double-decker bus up in front of Westminster just ahead of the 2019 election, leaning quite clearly into Whoppers on the side of buses. I'm being a little bit playful, but I think the thing I love the most about that campaign is, it had huge coverage all over the world, all earned media that we could never have afforded, but it was something that we agreed with our agency BBH on WhatsApp, and we turned it around within around 24 hours, spending around £10,000 on the whole campaign. So in terms of being able to respond and being able to react to things, we always welcome ideas, but this just felt like a really fun execution, and it, funnily enough, came out of the woods again.
It's kind of evergreen,
isn't it? It is evergreen, yeah. It's good.
Never going to go out of style. So BK is a challenger brand, and that seems to really inform a lot of your strategy and your approach. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many challenger brands out there, and I think everybody refers to us as a challenger brand. And we are a grown-up brand. We've been around a long time, but from a challenger spirit perspective, or from a challenger mentality perspective, some of it is necessity. So we don't have the footprint or the volumes or the budgets of our competition in the category. So that naturally forces a spirit of, bravery and creativity. But it also forces us to play to our strengths and really hone in on what they are. So we don't really have time to talk about everything, nor do we have the budget to talk about everything, but we have an opportunity to go all in on the things that are really defining for us as a brand and really differentiating. And that's, I guess that spirit is just kind of forced in that environment. But it's also, it's also nurtured by the environment you work in, and it's the organization you work in, and we all want to have that kind of creative bravery, but it very much depends on, do you have a business that is supportive of that? Your agencies can come to you with the best ideas and you can have that real excitement, but if the business isn't supportive of that, then you're not going to take that risk as a CMO or as a marketing team. You're not going to have your name on that. So I think it's so important that you're in a culture where that is supported and everyone recognizes that you need that.
Yes.
That challenger spirit to cut through and to drive conversation that you couldn't do with traditional media.
And it also kind of informs your persona, doesn't it? Like the Burger King persona is a little bit irreverent, a little bit cheeky.
Yeah, our tone of voice, we talk a lot, I didn't even write this in my notes, but we talk a lot about this go Whopper or go home mentality. we go all in. If we're going to go on something, we go all in, and we all get behind it, we all back it. If it does really well, as in this case, we can all celebrate that. If we fuck it up, we will all learn from that, and we have to just all be in that same boat together. But I guess our tone of voice, our external tone of voice, that's kind of our internal tone, but our external tone of voice is very rooted and real. Authenticity is so important to us. And I think that very much drives our, where we play and where we don't play. If we have a right to be there, great. If we don't, we're not going to jump on that bandwagon, and we shouldn't. But then I think we also, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We're more than happy to poke fun at ourselves. We do take our food seriously, though, and big taste is probably the exception to that.
I think this is what we're going to see perfectly exemplified in Bundles of Joy. Shall we play the film?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, I was clenching my fists in memory of
I get all the emotion.
that middle bit of the film.
Really weird. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to cry. I've seen that so many times, but I still go, ooh.
But that's exactly it, isn't it? That's what we're going to talk about. There is so much to unpack here. Let's start with the conception of the idea.
Oh, lovely.
I was really pleased with myself.
That's good. It's good. The idea came from a very clear brief to drive delivery awareness. Literally drive delivery awareness. We have been doing delivery for a long, long time, but we don't have the levels of delivery awareness that our competition have, and probably because we haven't had the traditional media investment or budget to put behind just delivery. We're too busy talking about Whopper and everything else that we want to play to. So, just having a full TV campaign on delivery just isn't really an option for us. That said, if we're going to talk about delivery, we wanted to do it in a way that was meant something. It was brave and could cut through, because again, this was going to be a social film and an out-of-home campaign. So the brief was very clear. It was, we need to drive delivery awareness. The idea had actually been presented to us by BBH many years ago, pre-pandemic. It was presented as an insight. We have this, there's this insight that post-labor, there's this intense hunger, which for those of you who know will know. A lot of, there's some insight there that is saying that, many new mums are craving burgers, and we want to delve in a little bit deeper on that. But at the time, we didn't really have, there just wasn't the right fit. There wasn't a context for it. And to be honest, delivery was in its infancy. It wasn't as big as it is now. When the team represented as in the context of a delivery campaign, we were like, oh, wow, okay. How do we do this? How do we make it happen, and how do we do it in a way that truly represents that moment in a non-gimmicky way?
So that's it, isn't it? Because so much of it is about the sensitivity and the thought with which you present an idea like that. How did you actually go about exploring that and making sure that execution was really sort of attuned to people's realities?
That was the most important bit, and all credit to BBH on the creative execution. It was really, really beautiful, and it's something we were all so mindful of as a team. How do we do this in a sensitive, respectful way, but in a real way, so that it doesn't feel like this, airbrushed, beautiful, idyllic view of how you think you might be after labour, all glowy and nurturing and lovely, and you're all of those things, but you're also bloody starving, and it's like, how do we capture that feeling? So we were very conscious of that, and we were also very conscious that we wanted to make sure that insight was clear, that we were validating that insight. So we knew it was a thing, but we didn't know how much. So we decided to partner with Mumsnet, clearly a platform where mums and dads everywhere share their experience and candor, ask all the questions. We decided to work with them on doing some research to understand what is it that new mums crave after labour, and it did vary. It was, burgers were high up there, but there was also cravings for sushi, not having had raw fish for 9 months, or lots of comments about buttery toast and things like that. So there were lots of things, but there was no doubt, there was a very clear insight that there was a massive hunger, and many who hadn't eaten for 24 hours.
100%.
Yeah.
And then actually in the way that you've captured it, you talked about the beauty of the film, but what was really striking to me was this was taken by partners. This footage was not sort of stage managed. Not stage managed, choreographed. It was a real image. Obviously there's a bit of, post-production with anything you would put on out of home, to make it work, but actually they were very real, raw images of, eating a burger after birth. And that was really important to us because it needed to feel real and representative of that moment rather than this perfectly idyllic, beautiful, moment. It is a beautiful moment, but it needed to feel real. You don't look blow dry ready, do you?
No.
Be real.
Well, some do, but...
It's quite a big call to make, to take this kind of stance, to push into this space and to do so in a very real and raw way. You need to have an internal culture, as you mentioned, that kind of supports that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that balance of risk and trust and agility?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely feel, I think the rest of the team feel as well, we feel very lucky to work in an organisation that actively supports this. That doesn't mean we don't have conversations where we're like, we're thinking of doing this, is it right? We often say when we get a brief or get an idea back, it's doing its job if it makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable. But really the purpose of this was, if we're going to do work on anything, delivery or new product launches, it's got to make people feel something. And that was the intention. We want people to feel something. It can't just be a, delivery ad's a delivery ad. We deliver great, but it needed to make people think beyond that. And I guess internally, when we shared the idea first, we had lots of feedback from mums and partners saying, they could all tell their stories. They all instantly recognized this moment. And I think that was really reassuring for us that, okay, this is what we think it is. I might know from personal experience that's what I wanted, but it doesn't necessarily mean the rest of the world do. So we talked about that a lot. We obviously then wanted to validate it, and I think that was more reassurance. But yes, there is a balance of risk, but we as a brand have taken many risks over the years. So there's a culture of risk. But I think with anything like this, if it's rooted in a real insight, that is a recognizable insight, then it feels like more of a measured risk. It feels like something that you can do.
Fantastic. And then, of course, there was quite a lot of response to this campaign with, I guess it's fair to say, a spectrum of feedback. I'll just give people a moment to read it, because I don't know if you saw this LinkedIn conversation, but it really bubbled for probably about 10 days.
We had a lot, the strength of response and feeling was probably more than we expected. And it really ranged. It wasn't just one, or one or two sides. There were lots of different perspectives on what it was we were trying to do as a brand, how people felt about that, either as a woman or a mother or as a partner, or as someone who works. We had comments from, midwives and health workers. We definitely had a lot of strong opinions from men on what women should consume.
Such a big call to make, isn't it, on LinkedIn?
Yeah, and that feels like quite a strong thing to say, but it was very visible and very public on LinkedIn, that strength of feeling and strength of opinion. And I will temper it with, I think in some cases it came from a good place. It came from surely the right thing to do is to have a green juice. But try telling a woman after 50-something hours of labour that it's a green juice she needs. Wait for the response. And I think that response then started to play out live in front of us on LinkedIn.
Yes, there's a response to the response.
A response to the response. Yeah. And, we saw all perspectives, all, versions of their truth or their experience. And actually, when you know what you're talking about, you know what you're talking about. And yes, there's room for all of these opinions and all of these perspectives. I think for us, the main thing was it was driving a conversation. It was making people feel something. And they wanted to actively, publicly talk about their view. I'm trying to be really diplomatic.
I'll come in now. What I find really fascinating about this is I, for one, if I was a brand manager, would be so tempted to just jump in and be like, let me just correct a few things about how you're interpreting this. Let me somehow control the narrative. And it seems like you and your team were kind of comfortable with letting that conversation be and letting it evolve.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we weren't hiding behind the couch, or hovering above the keyboard, wanting to respond. That would have been a personal response, which is not the right thing to do. But I think as a brand, the work is out there, the conversation is happening. It's not our right at that point, I don't think, and it wasn't in this case, to intervene. To what end? To, reinforce where we were coming from. I think that was pretty clear. I think the insight was pretty clear. I think to have waded in with our view or our perspective at that point would have actually created more of a, not that it was a problem, but would have fueled a flame. It would have looked like we were taking a side, and actually it wasn't our role as a brand to take sides in this. It was about creating feeling and conversation, and that's exactly what it did. And I just don't think we had a role to play in the perspectives and the feelings that then came from that. And I'm really glad, we didn't. I think we've seen lots of examples of brands jumping in when they feel something's not going to plan or going their way, and it doesn't always pay off. I just think it's, our role in this was to present the work, represent that moment in the best possible way. And once it's out there, it's not ours anymore. It's for everyone else to have their views and their perspectives.
And what's special about this is it feels like kind of organic conversations about brands and about campaigns is an increasingly rare beast, that things actually taking off and getting a life of their own is that kind of lightning in a bottle moment that you manage to get. Often it feels like it's about that storytelling, but also about that authenticity in terms of how you landed that. What do you feel sort of captured the imagination with people on this particular campaign?
I think it was because it was so real. And I just think we're not used to being faced with real images of moments like that in advertising. You can go way back and think Benetton probably did it, in the 80s with, many of you won't remember, but, pictures of newborn babies in adverts. And at times it was hard to relate it to what they were doing, but they were certainly adverts that drove conversation and drove feeling. And I think in a world where there is so much, particularly in our category, where there is a lot of media spent and a lot of product shots and, a lot of food porn and all of that, there is, to a certain degree, a level of brand apathy. Like, what is going to make you feel something about a brand that will get into you so that you consider them? And ultimately, our job is to drive brand consideration. We've 98% brand awareness. We're not really struggling on that front, but it's about being front of mind and driving consideration. That's what we need to do. And to do that, you've got to make people feel something. And, that it felt like a place that we could play and a place where we, could show up in a slightly different way to a classic delivery campaign. And yeah, ultimately that's what we're trying to do. And it drove, what we wanted in terms of, results and coverage. That was everything. I'm going to my notes now, but
let's talk about some of the results actually, because this is really interesting in terms of how much it punched above its weight. I think you said over 100 pieces of earned media.
100 pieces of earned media, and we appeared in the Daily Mail, which was amazing, the New York Post. But I think what was even, what was really nice to see as well is we had, lots of very well-followed mum Instagrammers suddenly sharing the work and getting behind it, which was really nice. But, you know, all the coverage that went with the debate, we started to get articles written about the debate it had generated, and, you know, opinion articles around, you know, well, is this the right way to do things, and why was there such a feeling of, or such a pushback on what women should eat? And it just took on a life of its own.
Very topical, very energised, conversation.
Yeah.
So if you were kind of reflecting on it all and thinking of 3 things that you were proud of, or you kind of take as principles to move forward with at Burger King, what would they be?
I think, you know, the first one will always be for us, and I guess the thing we're most proud of is that creative bravery and that willingness to do things in a different way. And like I said, some of it is a necessity, and we're fine with that. You know, we'll find a way to, you know, cut through and drive conversation and you know, reach our audience. I think on this, we, to a certain extent, had to trust our gut, and we do trust our gut in a lot of the work that we do. I know that's not a modern measurement tool. It's not ad testing. It's not going to give me a number at the end that spits out a, yes, you should do this. I don't think any ad testing mechanic, some of you in the room might argue, but I don't believe any of them would have told us that it would generate this level of feeling and conversation. So, you know, I think we're pretty proud of that. And I think the final thing is just that we stuck to our guns on making sure that what we were doing was rooted in insight, and it was rooted in real, and then I guess had the guts to go ahead with it. But we're very proud of it, and proud of the debate that came off the back of it.
Rightly so. What piece of advice would you offer all of the challenger brands in the room?
I mean, trust your gut. That's easier said than done, but it does help when you've done it a few times and then you kind of go, okay, we back ourselves. I think as a challenger brand, you need to really lean into your strengths and know what makes you different, because you will not have the time or money or scope to talk about everything. So what is it that you really want to hone in on and lean in on and invest in? And it might change over time, but be really clear on that. And look, it massively helps if you work in an organization that is supportive of, you know, that kind of creative bravery. And I recognize that not everyone has that gift, you know, of being able to turn around to the CEO and say, we're going to do this, and have his full backing. But, you know, I guess that comes with, you know, experience and reputation, and the brand trusting the team. And I guess with a lot of transient teams, that doesn't always happen, but it does happen in some cases. And I think that for us is, you know, that level of trust in the organization and with our agencies is really, really helpful in this.
That's wonderful. Katie, thank you so much. We've got time for a couple of questions if anyone wants to ask anything. Hi.
I can do it without microphones now. I thought the campaign was really brilliant, actually. But the question, I always hate asking it, with HFSS sort of legislation coming through, just how you feel that might be affecting your ability to be brave as a brand in that sort of space?
It's a good question. And we're all, you know, clearly it's a hot topic and we're all talking about it. I think, if anything, we're going to have to be more creatively brave. And I think it's going to be more important than ever for us to do things very differently, because we won't be able to do things the way they've always been done. And actually, the fact that we've always had to behave in that way, I think will help us, because we'll say, right, how do you spin this on its head? What other media channels do we need to look at? How do we not go head to head or toe to toe with our competitors? And how do we find a different field to play in? And what does that look like? And I think, you know, that does require, you know, we need to keep on our toes and, you know, be agile with whatever is presented to us. And we still don't know all the facts. I don't know when that will happen, but we still don't know all the facts. But I think it will actually force that creativity more than ever, because we won't be able to rely on the traditional product shot or the, you know, depends what happens. We might not even be able to rely on the traditional logo use. So yeah, all of that will change.
Hi, thank you so much, Katie. I really love that. Even though I haven't had the experience of being able to scrunch my hands like that, I really resonated because of how empowering it was and how much audiences could resonate. I wanted to check with you if I'm right in assuming that driving conversation is what drives brand consideration. If I really like put in one sentence what I learned from this. And you mentioned earlier that being a challenger brand, you don't usually have the footprint or the budget to cover everything. So how do you know? And then also when they were having the conversation or the differences in on the threads on LinkedIn, that you just said that it's for the audience now to enjoy. So how do you know which conversations to be a part of? What are the things that, you know, Burger King's brand values or mission or, you know, that makes you know that this is the conversation you want to be a part of?
I mean, I'll start with that one. I think, yeah, it's where we feel we can show up and have relevance. So, for example, on Whopper on the side of a bus, a Whopper is another word for a lie. Not in every country, but in this country, it's, you know, it was used a lot by politicians slagging each other off in the lead up to that election. So actually, it you know, Whopper is what we talk about till the cows come home. It's our, you know, our kind of mantra. So it felt like the right place to show up. And I think every time we have an idea or something happens, I guess our agencies know our brand well enough and they know us well enough and they know the kind of always on briefs that we have. They are able to then match, okay, we have an objective here, this conversation is happening here, you know, is there a fit? And I just think they're all quite close to us and have worked with us for so long. BBH have been with us for 7 years. Cooler, our social media agency, have been with us for 7 years as well. So it's, you know, it's a long time, so you just get to know where you fit. And sometimes they'll present ideas and we'll be like, oh, I don't know, or it feels like another brand could do that, so it might not be for us. So it is a little bit, it's not, you know, there's no perfect, I guess, template for where it works or where it doesn't. I'm trying to go back to your first question on, sorry.
When you said that sometimes you're like, it feels like another company should be the one doing that, are there situations where you've just done it anyways? You know, back to the whole risk and trust, where you're like, oh, what are the telling points that, yeah, that's not for us, we shouldn't be the ones talking about?
If we feel another brand has more of a right to be there, we kind of say, I think we're quite good at saying no or knowing where not to play, because sometimes it just feels like a bit of a token bandwagon that a lot of brands will jump on something, and I get it, sometimes it really works, but sometimes you'll get to the end of it and you'll go, actually, that brand really nailed that, often Specsavers, or, you know, you'll go, actually, that's so right for them. They're just, you know, there isn't always a moment that we don't need to be part of every conversation, and I think we've learned over time that that's, you know, we need to be able to put certain things to one side and go, that's not for us. We don't need to be everywhere, because then it doesn't feel very ownable. So it's trying to understand, you know, where we do and don't play and what we can own. I missed one of your questions. I'm so sorry. No, okay.
I have a clock flashing at me.
Oh,
so.
we gotta go.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you,
Thank
Katie.
you.
Really.
Thank you.